Okay, hello everyone. I'm so glad that you're here. I see folks are still joining us, which is wonderful. And I hope you're comfortable in your seat or wherever you are. I'm delighted to have you here. My name's Nicole Wallack, and I'm the director of the undergraduate writing program in the Department of English and Comparative Literature at Columbia. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today for this event. This is Writing Inside and Outside the Academy, and in our second week, we're talking about writing in the social sciences with our special guest, Professor Mignon Moore, Chair and Professor of Sociology at Barnard, who I'll introduce in just a second. Before we get really rolling, I want to tell you about a few features of this event that will give you guidance for how to participate and just give you a sense of the rhythm of this evening's event. First of all, I want to let you know that it's being recorded, and so that means that you'll both have access to it now, of course, and afterwards. That also means that during the Q&A portion of this event, we're going to invite you to turn on your cameras if that's something that you feel comfortable and it's available to you, and to turn on your audio so that you can speak your questions directly to us in your own voice. I just think it's really powerful and important for folks not to moderate too much. And for us to hear one another and be presences for one another. Zoom is so weird. And one of the weirdnesses is, of course, that we see each other in these little small boxes. Someone will do, or if they're not already doing, wonderful cultural studies about the impact of all of that, besides the cognitive effects, of course. But the thing that I'm just going to ask for, if you feel comfortable, if it's available to you, to turn on your cameras during this event. It is wonderfully heartening to see your faces when we're here. Oh, see, now there's Bobby. See, I can see some of my colleagues and friends. There's Sue, and folks I don't know well, but I hope to meet. So thank you for being here. Ada, thank you, and Joshua and Thomas and Sam. Just appreciate you being here so much. And if you didn't put your name on your thing, I see you. I just don't know what your name is. I'll also say that during the Q&A, we're going to invite you to put the questions, if you would please send them to Beth Samea Q&A, and then she will help us to manage them on our end. Okay, so I think that that's all of the sort of arrangements that we have to make before we undertake this, this event. I want to just give you some context about how this program came to be very briefly, and then we'll get right into our work with Professor Moore. So as I said, I direct the undergraduate writing program, and in our program, we run both the first year course, University Writing, but we also house the university's Writing Center. And we also work on pedagogy and writing studies at Columbia. So we're one of the sites where that happens. And it has been the case in writing studies for, well over 25 years to 30 years that we've been concerned with writing, not just in one discipline, but across the disciplines. And so this event arose out of a desire to make visible to one another as scholars, as writers, as students, as novices and experts, as Nancy Summers would have taught us to say, and Laura Saltz, what it's like to actually get our writing done and to consider the many roles that writing plays for us in our lives inside and outside the academy. And in fact, we have a desire, a strong desire to make better bridges between these worlds. They are very porous boundaries between the university and the world beyond the university. And writing helps us, in fact, chip away at whatever tower metaphors might exist, we think. And so that's a real commitment of ours. So today, we're going to be talking with Professor Mignon Moore not only about the content of her writing, which is so important and groundbreaking and transformative, but also about her processes and her practices. Because for us, writing can be very mysterious, and it continues to be so until and unless more of us, more often, and with greater ease, learn how to just communicate what it means to get our writing done casually, less casually, formally, and for publication. So that's going to be the range of topics that we're going to consider. If we don't get to the topic that you want to get to, feel free to try and raise it in the chat, and we will do our best to address it. So now let me turn to introduce our honored guest, who I'm so glad is with us today, Professor Mignon Moore. Mignon Moore is Professor of Sociology at Columbia and Chair of the Sociology Department at Barnard College, which she joined in 2015. Her areas of expertise include race, LGBT populations, family, gender, aging, and qualitative research methods. Professor Moore has received grants and awards from the National Institutes of Health, Ford Foundation, Russell Sage Foundation, and the Woodrow Wilson Foundation. Her first book, Invisible Families, Gay Identities, Relationships, and Motherhood Among Black Women, that was from the University of California Press, is a study of same-sex parent families. It won the 2012 Distinguished Book Award from the ASA Sex and Gender section and was a finalist for the C. Wright Mills Award for the Society for the Study of Social Problems. Her scholarly research articles have been published in the American Sociological Review, American Journal of Sociology, Gender and Society, Annual Review of Sociology, Journal of Marriage and Family, and many others. Her current work examines health and social support for sexual minority seniors to determine the ways community institutions can be of service to this population. She's completing a book entitled In the Shadow of Sexuality, Social Histories of African American LGBT Elders, 1950 to 1979. And she is president-elect, although I think maybe president now, of Sociologists for Women in Society. And it's my great honor and pleasure to welcome you, Professor Mignon Moore. This is a space where rapturous applause would happen. So
thank you so
there
much.
we are. We can do our clapping for you. Thank you for being here.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands, I know. So in our short time, I just want us to start out getting a sense of how you came to writing, or how writing has come to you in different parts of your life, and you can go back as far as you want. We'd be delighted to hear. Tell us a little something about that, because people may think like, oh, you're such a distinguished writer and you always were like that. So it's sometimes helpful to think about it earlier.
Yes, well, I'll say that first of all, I want to say hello to everyone and thank you for joining us this evening. There are many other things you could be doing right now, so I appreciate you taking the time to come and share with us and listen and share. In terms of my writing, I'd say that I have it in, writing is in me, but I don't think I would not lead with that as an identity. I would not lead with the identity as writer, although it is very important to what I do for work, but also how I think of myself. As an example, I do some work at my children's school. I'm involved with the Parent Association and the writing of emails, you know, that when I announce things to parents is very important to me. I have a certain way that I want to do them. It's not just a method of communication. It also expresses who I am, you know, the words that I choose. And so I do think about my writing in the mundane areas of life, as well as in my research and writing. Even when I post on social media, I'm thinking about how am I presenting myself and my ideas when I write. So I'm very conscious of it. I'd say that when I went to college and had to write long papers, that's when I really began to gain confidence as a writer. I didn't come into college. I went to Columbia, graduated in 92, Columbia College. And I came from a very good public school in the suburbs of Long Island. So I didn't attend an independent school, and the school prepared me for college, but it didn't quite prepare me for the type of writing, what I thought of as long pages of writing. And I had to develop the confidence to write. I had to develop that over time, the confidence to believe that I could express my ideas in a clear way. And I'd say that I really didn't master that. And I don't think anyone masters it, but I feel more confident about it once I finished graduate school, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't until I began to write journal articles, try to get my work published in social science journals, that I really began to think of myself as a writer.
And can you think of something that was really hard won for you as a writer? Meaning like it was something that either someone needed to teach you or that you needed to teach yourself. So I hear this thing about length as being one of the things that felt new, right? Makes total sense. You're writing longer things. Were there other things, maybe even in graduate school? I know for some of us, I'll say for myself is true, that I had to really learn some new ways of being on the page or even creating working practices in graduate school that were very different from what I had learned before.
Yes, so I'd say I came into college really knowing the 5-paragraph essay, the persuasive essay that we were taught in school, and I'm sure high school is different now, but then, at least in my high school, that was what we were primarily taught. And in graduate school, I had to learn how to create an argument, that the answer to the so what question. I remember that was a revelatory experience for me in graduate school, that any paper had to have a so what question, and then we had to answer it. But I'd say really it was when I finished graduate school and I was trying to learn how to become a sociologist, and I was trying to learn how to write for journals, to get my work published in journals. And that involved, some licking of wounds. I don't know how many of you have submitted papers.
It's humbling.
Yes, but I had to really learn to swallow my pride, take a step back, and read the comments and respond to the comments and not just dismiss them. And I think that some people get stuck. They get stuck dismissing the comments. So we'll talk a little bit later, but some of the work that I've done involves writing about populations that are marginalized. And when people do that, many times when you get comments, you can just be dismissive and say, oh, well, this person doesn't understand my group, or this person doesn't value my group. But the comments are telling you something. And I learned how to write for journals. I remember in graduate school struggling to get something published, and I had a postdoctoral fellowship, a Ford fellowship at the University of Michigan. And during that time, I really learned to write. And I revised this paper that I'd been working on with another graduate student. And we got it accepted into one of the top 2 journals in our discipline. And I really remember that. I remember that, of course, for many reasons, but I felt that I had unlocked I had gotten the key to how to write for journals, how to be successful, what was the structure that was important, and how to frame the argument. And some people don't go that route. They choose to write books or book manuscripts. Some people do only write journal articles in sociology, and some people do a combination. I do a combination, and I feel that it's helpful to really learn that, how to write for scientific journals.
And so I hear a few things that I just want to follow up on quickly, and then we'll move on if you wish. One is about learning the journal, that each journal also has its own expectations, right? So it's not only about genre, the article versus the book, say, or the dissertation, but also about what any two journals might expect that might be different. Has that been your experience?
Yes, to an extent. So I do think it's important to understand the journal that you want to write for,
Mm-hmm.
to look at the articles, look at articles that have a similar methodology that you're
Mm-hmm.
using, and to see what makes for a successful journal article for that outlet. I
Yeah.
also think there is a certain structure, at least I'll just speak for sociology, that can be transferable, and it takes some practice. It takes some practice to learn how to write that way.
Can you just help us, for those of us who may have read your stuff, but the structure is kind of invisible to us because you do it so seamlessly. It doesn't announce itself, you know. What are some features of writing in social sciences for sociologists that are like very particular to the expectations in those journals?
Well, okay, so you have a basic structure that, when I teach senior sociology majors, and one of the requirements for graduation is that you write a paper, a research paper. And so I always give them a structure that involves the introduction, where you introduce the research question and the significance, the so what question, and why it's important and how you intend to answer it. And then we move to the literature review, relevant literature. How have people approached this question or similar questions in the past? What have been the major takeaways? What's still missing? What do you intend to do? But within that, it's not just the listing of the literature, it's really weaving in some of your argument for why your question is going to add something to this literature, add something to this field, address this in a new and important way, what you think we can gain from looking at this broader set of issues from your particular vantage point. And then, of course, you move to, at least, sociology, you move to data and methods, and how you chose your site, maybe, and your, whatever. I'm thinking now about qualitative methods, so maybe ethnographic work or interviews. And then you have your results. And for students, at least for undergraduates, I want them to just focus on 4 points. That might not be what I do in depending on the journal, but to argue these points and to weave in some of the relevant literature, but then show how your work is adding to that or does something different than that. And then the final is the discussion and conclusion, the takeaways from it, not just a reiteration of your findings, but what we gain from this new information and how we can use this in sociology, or maybe in practice. So that's the framing, but within that there are these other caveats, and especially I'd say mainstream sociology journals really want you to follow the structure, and sometimes people get into trouble because they just don't want to do it. They don't want to follow the structure. And I'm not a person that always follows the rules. I follow rules, but sometimes I challenge authority. But I just find that, at least I'll say for myself, I have been successful in having work on marginalized populations published in mainstream journals and receive grants and financial support by using mainstream methods. So the group is different, but I try to connect it to the field by using a structure and methods that they're familiar with. And so, because my goal is for it to become part of the canon.
That seems so crucial. Just, I hope everybody's really hearing that part. Not that there's only one way to do this kind of, challenge work, but it seems to me like one of the ones you're really pointing to is how do we introduce new materials, new objects of study into a field And you're saying that, I think that one of the ways is to keep it in a package that people know how to read, which is, and then also do other kinds of work potentially that breaks how they read or what they read. And I imagine that your books and other projects also sort of fit into that other category where you're doing a wider range of experiments in terms of form, for example.
Yes. I'd say that where I am the most exploratory has been in my methods, the ways that I've been able to study populations. I have had to use non-traditional methods to locate populations because much of the work that I've done has been on what I call invisible populations, people who in the past, and maybe you could argue now in the future because so many LGBT sites are going away, but people who are not necessarily part of a geographic community, but can come together as in a community for purpose, and then they may retreat back into their worlds. And so when I was thinking about how to study, how to learn more about a population, I would go to events that others hosted. But people are there to have a good time. They're there to socialize, art clubs, art salons and book clubs and nighttime parties and things like that, just social events. Yeah. And so what I did was I began to, first I observed for about a year. I went out into these kinds of events. And then I decided to, with some other people, to start hosting an event. And that brings people together that you can then study. Now, that wasn't my goal to bring them together just to study them. But I was bringing them together to create community, to become part of the community. But in the process of doing that, in the process of giving back to the community, I began to think about research. So I always have this thinking cap, this sociology thinking cap, and I began to look and observe and see activities and experiences that were outside of what I'd read about in the literature.
And so I know that we have some images to share and that they're related to your projects. Would this be a time to have us look at that towards
Sure.
projects that you're working on?
Yes.
I just want to ask one like practice question, which is, so you're going to the event, you're hosting the events, you're part of the events. These are for people in community with you. How then do you remember even what it is that you're noting? Is that something that you take care of by writing in a notebook? I mean, do you go, do people say, hey, Mignon, what are you doing? Oh, nothing, I'm just over here, just doing my thing. Like, what are you doing to because it seems very important when we're trying to be people who are studying behavior and social interaction. I've had some of this experience of looking in classrooms and doing work in classroom contexts. You want to be of the community, but also in some ways distant. So will you tell us a little bit about your method that way?
Sure. Well, I have to say, so the images that I have here are for some, this is after my first book. And when we began this event that we called Chocolate and Wine, Upscale Events for Women, it was in California, in Los Angeles. And this was not, I didn't have the intention of studying a population. I had the intention of trying to create community.
Yeah.
This was in Los Angeles. My partner and I had moved from New York, and where we'd been hosting events. And that's what we did for fun. And that's also the way that I integrated myself into a community. With these events, this was for us to feel connected, to find people like us, and to celebrate people like us. And we started with these happy hours. We do a monthly happy hour and open mic. and we did it at a Black lesbian-owned wine bar in downtown LA.
That seems
In
really
the
important.
course of doing it, I began to see these experiences that were sociologically interesting. And so in this case, it was the owners of the wine bar that I found interesting. And they were older, and their friends would come in and watch the younger people dance and, you know, do spoken word on the mic. And then my partner would DJ music in between these spoken word sets. And so on the one hand, I was interested in who they were and who their friends were, and what was their experience like, these older women who would come in and laugh at us and talk about their good old days. That was intriguing. That was sociologically interesting. But
I'm showing, I think, can you see the image here now?
This is a card.
What's this?
A card that we would distribute at other events in LA, letting people know about our upcoming monthly events. We did this once a month, and this was like a business card that Elaine is my wife now, but we were dating then. Although we were living together then, you know, we'd been together for a long time. And so she's a graphic designer, and so she designed these cards. And so this was one of the cards that we would pass along. And then if you turn to the next one, you can see the next one is a flyer. And the important thing about this flyer, well, there are a lot of things about it, but it's supposed to capture that this is something for women of color. It's called Soul Sundays. We always had Black women on the flyer, but everyone was invited. And when we talk about the event, we'd say it's chocolate women, meaning milk chocolate, dark chocolate, white chocolate, right? So that's everyone. But we wanted to center what Black women would want. What was the music that they would want? What kind of venue? What kinds of socializing would be of interest to them? So it was there was a politics behind it. It was to create community. There was a politics behind it. And then in that experience, I met people who were politically active in the rights of LGBT people, focusing on people in their racial and ethnic communities. So that became a research project for me. I didn't intend for that, but in bringing people together, I learned what the interests and needs were of the community. And that became a series of papers on the politics of respectability, the politics of multiple identities for LGBT people of color.
So tell us, I would like to have you tell us about these next images and whether these are part of that work. And again, I'm wondering, as a writer, how did you manage working with these materials? Are these images that you were working with? Are they interviews that you were doing? Help us understand what we're seeing here.
So, you know, I included these photos because I thought it was important for you all to see what we were doing. So this is a picture of the Chocolate and Wine women's basketball team that we started. We tried to do things that the community wanted. So these are women who are mostly in their 30s and 40s. Some of them had played ball in high school and college, and they were interested in forming a basketball team. I don't play basketball, my wife doesn't play basketball, but they play basketball, and we ended up forming this team. And you can see we won the championship. We played the championship in the Staples Center. We also had a fit club for people who wanted to lose weight, and we hired a trainer. So these are things that we did to participate in the community. It's not a story of me sitting back and taking notes. We would talk about what happened. I would go home and I would write about what happened, what the event was like, look at the pictures, and try to capture what was going on. But my main goal was creating community and participating in this life. And then the sociology behind what was happening. What were some of the, what did I see about it that was sociologically interesting?
So, and so this looks like another one of the events. This
is not the image I wanted to show you, but this is the only one I could find. And this is at a Valentine's Day party that we hosted. If you can look at the top, you can see my wife with the computer. She's DJing up there. Her name is Elaine. DJ1.
In the corner, you mean?
in the top.
Yeah. Oh, in the top. Oh, in the very top. There.
The DJ
Yes, I see. Yes, in
we
the
had a
booth.
proposal
Yeah.
that night. Someone proposed. Women like to propose. But then this is them having a good time. And I chose this
Yeah.
because we wanted people to feel good about who they are.
Yeah.
And to reduce the shame and stigma. And we wanted something that they would enjoy. And so I wanted to try to capture that. I couldn't really capture it, but this is one image.
And tell, is this an event? Is this another event, or is this something where you went to something that was already happening?
Yes, I went to, so we have a Martin Luther King Day parade in Los Angeles during Martin Luther King weekend. And it was the first year that there would be an LGBT contingent. I mean, it sounds just so old fashioned, I'm sure when young people are listening to this, but there was a time when people were afraid to be openly gay in their racial and ethnic communities, to be openly queer, to be openly LGBT. And this was an organization that marched for the very first time with open queer banners saying they are LGBT. And I wrote about it, and I wrote some papers about this experience and what it meant for them. And so this is a photo, and then there's one more, the second one. And this one, I chose this one because this is when we were going through some of the rougher parts of town. And you could see the person who's smiling there and hugging with the glasses is the organizer of this organization called the Here to Stay Coalition. And you see regular folk in the neighborhood who are watching the parade, and it's this combination of being in the community, having the political part, being accepted, right? There's a camera there, it's being recorded. So I wrote about all of this. I have some papers. I think I don't know if I gave you, I think I might have sent one of them. But this is the intersection, right? I write about intersections, and this is an intersection here where you see the political, the cultural, the family, the socioeconomic, you get a sense of the neighborhood. And so these images are telling you what I'm writing about and how I'm approaching the work. That's what I hope you get from these images, not just that they're interesting, but you can see how I'm approaching these mainstream sociology questions, but bringing it in a different way.
That seems so important. And this beautiful picture.
So this is a different part of my work. This is more of the activist work that we found ourselves doing. We got married in 2012. We'd been together 10 years, and I was like, okay, this is it, Are we getting married or what?
Oh, what?
But
it's a universal question.
Oh boy.
Oh, well, what?
You can see this.
See, that's how I know you're raised on Long Island. Just oh, what? I live on Long Island now. Anyway, so.
Well, we were part of the Freedom to Marry campaign, and they used our wedding photo for this campaign, and we ended up being featured in Time magazine. And then, interestingly, we were also on the cover of Black Enterprise, which is a conservative Black business magazine. And this is work we found ourselves doing that was related to my writing, right? The other piece that I shared was a personal piece about my experience living my life as an openly gay woman, a Black woman, a woman who grew up in the church, a woman who is very well integrated in my racial and cultural communities, and what that looks like for me and for people like me to be openly LGBT.
Yeah. I want us to be able to honor these next pictures. And then I have a couple of writing specific questions before. I hope we'll have a chance to hear you read a sentence or two.
You can stop. You don't have to. We can go back to. Okay, this is important because
it's important.
Is this person in the middle is Jewel, and Jewel Theus Williams, and she is the founder of what they call the Catch One, which is the oldest Black lesbian-owned nightclub in the country. And the person next to her with the hat on is DJ Lovey, who passed away since this photo. And she used to be a DJ for parties. And so my current project is on these people. And it was it was through my experience going out and doing the political work and going out socially and hosting my own events that I got to know these people. And they are the motivation for the book that I'm writing now.
That is so wonderful. And I'm sorry that we can't get to the very last one, because I just want to make sure we have time for other parts. Would you honor us with reading a couple of pages from your work so that we can hear what it means to bring all that work onto the page?
Well, I'm afraid it's going to take too much time. I have just a couple paragraphs. I'll try. It's I actually went with something that I shared, but I don't know that many people have read it. So it says, it's about my experience, and it says, although I've been in lesbian relationships for more than 25 years, until recently I never viewed myself as an active participant in the LGBTQ movement. I never saw myself as outside of the mainstream, and I've not seen myself as trying to assimilate into dominant norms. My norms have always been my own. My interest in rebelling against establishments has been about removing barriers that block my access and other people's access to equal opportunity. And these are barriers that are constructed around inequities. I reject the binary formulation of heterosexism that positions certain behaviors as homosexual or heterosexual. So in my quest for marriage equality, I never saw myself as acquiescing to heteronormativity. And I live daily as an out Black lesbian woman. In doing that, I'm trying to create a full experience that allows me to gain access to the things I want. And I wanted my same-sex partner to have the same legal rights as a different sex partner might receive. I wanted us to have and raise children together in a way that freed my children from any secondary status or citizenship because of our sexual orientation. I did not want the law to restrict me from having those things, so I challenged the law. And then I talk about how we move around institutions that are built for heterosexuals and heterosexually married families. And this is the part I wanted to share. I was raised in an apostolic holiness faith, a particularly conservative form of Black Pentecostalism. And I'm sure it rejects homosexuality and same-sex relationships as falling outside of God's will. My grandparents were among the earliest members of the church I grew up in, and my uncle is the current pastor. When I moved back to New York in 2015, I arrived with a wife and 2 young children. And we came back so that our children could bond with their family. And the church has been the center of my extended family's social life. And it's a place that I've always felt was like home. And so I had to bring them to church. And when I go to church, my wife comes along. She's left of center in her gender presentation, and she dresses in men's clothes. Although my church requires that women specifically not wear clothes pertaining to a man, in quotes, she arrives wearing men's pants, shoes, shirts, and sometimes blazers, but never a tie. The 4 of us, we enter, we sit on a pew near the front, and in varying ways, we participate in the worship service. Our children sing in the children's choir. I stand with the congregation. I sing along with the hymns. I speak aloud when the church reads the Bible passages. After service, the people I've known for 40 years come over and embrace us. And I'm sure many of them are biting their tongues to keep from saying something that might be offensive, but they hold back any negative opinions about my sexuality, although they're not afraid to tell me I don't bring the children to church enough. They're fine to do that. And so this is the last paragraph. While scholars may theorize our church participation as an attempt to conform to societal standards of heterosexuality, our presence and involvement is in no way experienced by us as an attempt to conform. I'm sure the parishioners do not see us as conforming. When I sit in the pew and the visiting minister gives a sermon, I hold my breath waiting to hear something homophobic. I so far have not heard anything homophobic. I believe the visible participation of our little LGBT parent family in this storefront holiness church in Queens, New York is radical, even revolutionary behavior. And every time I walk through those doors, I'm making myself vulnerable while I silently bring my full self to the altar. Those who say this is conformist have not experienced this type of participation in conservative institutions. So I guess here, you know, this is about writing, and I'm talking to you about something else that's not writing. But I want you to see the motivation for the writing. I want you to see how I can take something that is marginalized, that when I started this work, you'd only see people who are gay on TV on places like Jerry Springer. Oh, ta-da, my wife is, my mother's gay, my child is gay. This is the big reveal that no one cares about anymore. But in my writing, I've managed to take this community, I use it, I use my experiences in it to write about politics, to participate in politics, to write about my experiences. I also write in a very more conservative way for journals, and write scholarly articles. And I write books, which are scholarly, but allow more creativity and allow me to be more exploratory in how I communicate. And so that's why, you know, I've focused on, you know, I don't want you to come away from this not seeing the part about writing, but I wanted you to understand how I approached the writing that has been part of my academic career.
I want to thank you so much for saying all that and reading that amazing work. Would you remind us where those passages came from, just so that folks can follow up?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I meant to say that in the beginning. So this is
That's okay, that's my job.
It's in a chapter of a book that's called Queer Families and Relationships After Marriage Equality. And the editors are Yarborough, Jones, and DeFilippis.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. And it's
wonderful. I don't know, I just have one comment to make, and then we're going to turn to our wonderful questions that are starting to come in for you. You said, well, I'm not really talking about writing, but for me, you're talking about writing down to the ground, because you're saying writing is a way to be present, to be visible, to be voiced, to be fully human, and to bring together the different aspects of one's learning and knowledge and community and context. And that is the stuff of which writing is made. Writing is not a thing we do with what we have. It's a way of being the way we are, and with others. So I also, early on when you were talking about the first article that got published in a journal, you talked about it as a piece that you did with a co-author. And many folks say in the humanities are less familiar with even doing that kind of work, although folks in social sciences and sciences will have more familiarity with kind of collaborative work along those lines. And I'd love to hear that. But actually, I have a more maybe prosaic question for you about your writing. Can you tell us when and how and on what you get it done? Like, do you write in longhand? Do you write every day? Are we looking at the place where you write? Are you someone who writes in little pieces over time? Do you write all at once? So just anything about what it actually looks like when you're doing the work. And then I'm going to turn to the wonderful full questions that other folks have and ask them to ask you.
Sure. So it depends on what I'm working on. When I write my research, when I write for academics, my academic writing, I used to have so much time to sit and pontificate and read and take a nap and then wake up and write. And
a nap?
Oh my goodness, I miss that.
Me too.
I don't have more. So I write in pieces and I try to create blocks of time. When I'm in a place where I need to write, I have to have some place quiet, and I write on the computer, but I take notes in my notebooks, and I read, and when I read, I'm in dialogue with the reading. So I'm reading and I'm responding to it with notes in a notebook. And I translate those notes into, on the computer, into a document that becomes this living document. I have one of those right now on my computer. I'm revising this, and I feel like it's like this, and it's waiting for me to come back to it. And I'm bringing the notes that I have when I sit at home. I might have 45 minutes at the end of the night these days. But now that my children are going back to school and they're in school, I can come and sit, and it's still in me. So, but I write in notebooks, and then I translate it onto the computer, and I sit my butt in a chair, and I don't look at my emails, and I write.
Thank you for that. I think just like what it looks like as work, as actual meaningful labor, that when you say it's in you, we have to get it somewhere, I want to turn to, thank you so much for these wonderful responses and those incredible images. And of course, for the foundational work that you're doing, groundbreaking work. And, as you know, continually meaningful, crucial work that hasn't left, I don't think it's lost its urgency at all right now. It may be more urgent than ever. So folks, if you want to add questions for Professor Moore, then please go ahead and put them again in the chat to Beth Samea Q&A, and we'll try and get to as many as we can in the time that we have. But I want to ask, I see that we have a great first question here from Kayla Thompson. So Kayla, if you're still here with us, would you go ahead and ask your question to Professor Moore?
Hi. Hi. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit nervous.
It's okay.
One of the questions that I asked was, how would you separate your personal writing from your professional writing, since they're so interrelated and connected in so many ways?
So the things I've shared tonight really mix my personal writing and my personal journey with my work. But in my scholarly work, I try to keep those separate. The first book that I wrote about Black women who are gay and creating families was a mixed method study, but it wasn't about me, and I didn't write it. It wasn't about. I didn't include my personal experiences with the topic. I was able to, but me being part of that community allowed me to connect in a certain way. So who I am is important for the work and how I view the work. The book that I'm working on now is a sociocultural history of elders who came of age between 1950 and 1979. So I'm personally interested in it, and that motivates me. It motivates the kinds of questions that I ask. It motivates the excitement that I have about the work, and that comes across in the writing. But it is not about me. It may be about, it's about a community that enables me to be here today, doing this work, doing work that I love, speaking my truth. But the work is not, it's not about me. And that's important. That's important for scholarly work, for at least for the scholarly work that I do, that it's not about my personal feeling about the group.
Thank you. That seems really important. We have a question from Ada Zhang. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce that correctly. Ada, would you ask your question? It feels timely now.
Oh yes, hi Professor. I want to ask, how can you really balance your relationship with your interviewees, like your friends from the community, and your work? Do you think participating and transferring your experience of your friends into your publications is taking advantage from them? Because sometimes I feel really guilty of this. I didn't do much for them, but I transfer the talk with them into my work, my thesis, my publications. Thank you.
Yes. So with my first project, when I entered that community, those people were not my friends. I didn't know them. I didn't know, I had not been in those spaces. And so I was able to look at what was going on from the perspective of an outsider who had no prior knowledge. But I was accepted because of the insider status of who I am. And so I didn't become really, my friendships developed over time, but once I became integrated in that community, then I couldn't really write about those particular people anymore. So I wouldn't be able to go back now into Harlem and write about those people because now they're my long-term friends. The same way in California, when we went there, we didn't know anyone. The only person we knew when we went to Los Angeles was the person that we rented an apartment while we looked to purchase our house. And that one woman introduced us to people, and that's how we built that community. And so the other part of that is that I was giving back to the community. I wasn't just taking. And so that's what I wanted you to get from some of those images, the ways that we gave back to the community by creating the basketball team and creating the fit club and by hosting these events. And sometimes I'd be crying because I didn't want to do it. I wanted to do something else, but I promised we were going to do this monthly party, and people were asking, when is the next one? And it was making them feel good about themselves. These were beautiful venues where we didn't see Black lesbians, and we certainly didn't see them as the 300 people that were there, all filled with these women and people, trans people. And so it was something that I honored, even when I didn't want to, when I just wanted to just do my work. I still went out and we still did it until we left. So we had those children, and then who had time? And then we moved.
And then you moved. Do you feel that, I just want to sort of add to this, another question. Is this something about the practice of sociology that you feel like you and potentially others whom you might name are a part of, thinking about how you situate yourself in relationship to the communities of study? Would you speak to that? Are there other folks working in the field whose work kind of seems to come out of a similar, I'll say, ethics of practice of sociology?
Well, I can think, there's a book called Other, Please Specify. And it's an edited volume on queer methods and how, and some of the trials and tribulations of either collecting data on queer populations or using alternative methods to capture some other political process or some other process. And so there are some really great sociologists in that volume. The volume is edited by Tay Meadow, who's here in Columbia Sociology, Kristen Schilt at the University of Chicago, and Delane Compton down in New Orleans. And so I'd recommend that book as a way to think about the ways that people are thinking about. You know who else? There's a person, Jafari Allen, who's an anthropologist, who has just finished a book on LGBTQ people globally, looking at people of color globally. And he says that the methods in anthropology just weren't sufficient. And so he had to rely on alternative methods. And he talks about Black studies and methods that are used in Black studies. And so he went beyond the bounds of anthropology to write this book. So, but I just don't want you to leave here thinking this is me search. That's what people sometimes call it. And I remember I was at a dinner party in Los Angeles with some colleagues, and the person who hosted the party said, well, how do you feel, just writing about yourself? And so I looked around the room. This is a European man, and he writes about Europe, and he writes about men in Europe. And there was a woman there, a Chinese woman, who wrote about women factory workers in China. And then there was a white older man from England who wrote about the white working class. And then there was a Mexican man at the table, and he wrote about migration patterns from Mexico. And I said to him, well, how interesting that you think that I'm the one writing about myself when I'm writing about these communities. When you look around this table, all of us have a connection to the communities that we're writing about, but you don't think about it as me search. You think about this as me search because you've marginalized this group and you've marginalized me.
it's so important to call it out and to
Said in a
also
nicer
situate
way,
ourselves.
nicer way than that. I filled myself with
I'm sure you
more
did.
attached to it.
I'm sure you did, but I'm
That was
saying that
good.
it's very challenging, I think, to name that kind of bias when it's being performed in front of us that way, and racism, I think. And I wonder about how we can teach our students to foreground our goals for our work in such a way that it doesn't get read as me search, even if we're implicated in it, even if we are of a community. Do you have some thoughts about that? That's kind of an ill-formed question, I'm sorry, but it's ill-formed in my mind.
I think, I would give an answer, but it's not the only answer. And so I just want to say that there are many ways to do this. And this might not be the right way for everyone, but I will say what I shared earlier, which was to really be, for me, it was to be grounded in my discipline, to really understand my discipline, what it means to be a sociologist, what it means sociologically at social problems or inequalities or the structure of organizations or whatever social phenomena you're writing about, and to really know that. And if you know that, then you can bring any group and people who are interested in people who are interested in how power dynamics in families, let's say, right? We tend to write about that in terms of women and men and power, and we think about power in terms of money. I wrote a paper that was published in the American Sociological Review about how lesbian couples divide housework and paid work and childcare and other sources of power that are not just about income. And I was able to do that, right? And people who write about power in marriages are interested, even if they don't care about lesbians. And then people who care about sexual minority groups are interested, even if they don't care about traditional breadwinner, homemaker role models. And so that has been effective for me in my career, but there are other ways to do it.
It absolutely is true. And it's never one person's job to figure it out for everyone. We have to figure it out for ourselves. Our time is dwindling, but I just wanted to ask Kennedy Peace, if you're still here with us, would you ask your question really quick so that we can hear what Professor Moore has to say to it before we take our leave of one another?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So my question for you is, how has the current pandemic affected your ability to create community? I know you talked about that a lot, but how has the current pandemic affected your ability to create community? Has it helped or hurt your observations and things that you've been looking out for?
Do you mean in terms of my research or personally?
A little bit of both, just because they are kind of intertwined.
Well, my personal life is no longer just about LGBT communities. And so I think I mentioned my wife would laugh because she thinks I take my job as a grade parent for my daughter's second grade very seriously, but I'm a grade parent, and it's my job to help create community amongst the other parents in this pandemic. And so this weekend, I'm actually hosting a cocktails and tea for a couple different classrooms in the second grade. And I was, asking about icebreaker questions and ways for people to connect. And so that's not about my research. Although who knows, maybe I'll write about social processes in independent schools for families. I don't know. But I haven't found much community right now in terms of LGBT people, mostly through social media posts and looking and thinking about the good old days. But I guess what I've done is participate, in this role as class parent. Maybe I said yes because maybe I wanted to, maintain a connection to people. I don't know. Are you going into therapy, Kennedy? Maybe you're helping me with my understanding of self.
Well, that we will have to answer another time because our time has done its thing. Professor Mignon Moore, Thank you so much for the wonderful conversation, for the insights into your work and your practice, and the generosity of sharing the images that are so much a part. Yes, thank you, Kennedy, for starting the applause. Can we get some? You can turn on your audio, and we can give real live applause to people. Yay! Let's do it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, and we'll be in touch soon. Thank you.